My name is Kayla Thompson. I'm 24 years old and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I work as a graphic designer, which means I spend most of my days creating digital art for clients. But lately, my life has been more about surviving family drama than anything on my computer screen. I grew up with my mom, who was my whole world. She was kind, full of warmth, and taught me everything about staying true to myself. But when I was 18, my mom passed away suddenly. Losing her was like the floor was ripped from under me. Suddenly, everything felt uncertain. The home I had, the people I trusted, even my sense of safety. After a few years of living mostly on my own, my dad remarried. At first, I wanted to be happy for him. He had found someone he loved, a woman named Margaret, who came from a wealthy family in Buckhead. Their house was massive. Polished oak floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight streaming in, elegant chandeliers, and a smell that was somewhere between expensive leather and fresh flowers. It looked like a dream home from one of those lifestyle magazines. But even as I stepped into that world, I couldn't shake a feeling that things weren't exactly as they seemed. Margaret had 2 kids, Emily and Sean. They smiled politely when I arrived, but there was something in their eyes, a glint of curiosity, maybe even suspicion. And my dad, he was proud of his new life, proud to show me this perfect family setup. But sometimes pride can blind you to the cracks hiding just beneath the surface. I remember walking through the hallway the first time I arrived. The sunlight hit the marble floors, bounced off the gilded frames, and made the house feel almost too bright, almost too polished. It should have been welcoming, but instead it felt like stepping onto someone else's stage. Every laugh, every gesture felt rehearsed. Every smile seemed calculated. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself, Kayla, maybe it's just nerves. Maybe they just need time to accept you. And I clung to that hope, the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could finally feel like I belonged somewhere again. But then came the dinner invitation. A dinner that was supposed to be warm, casual, and family-friendly. Something about it didn't sit right. The way Emily whispered to her mom while looking at me, the way Sean avoided eye contact. It was like they were plotting something, and I wasn't sure if I was going to like what I was about to find out. Little did I know, that dinner would change everything.
I remember the first time I really noticed it, the little things that didn't make sense at first. At breakfast one morning, Margaret said, "Kayla, are you sure that outfit is appropriate for a dinner with my friends?" It sounded polite on the surface, but the way she raised her eyebrow made me feel like I was being judged, like my presence was a problem. Emily and Sean would make jokes that stung in a way that wasn't funny. Sean once said, "Oh, Kayla, you don't talk like the rest of us." Emily would roll her eyes if I asked a question, or sigh as if I was taking too long to understand something obvious. I tried to laugh along, tried to shrug it off, but inside it felt like being poked by tiny needles, subtle, repeated, and exhausting. The house itself only made it worse. Polished floors, tall ceilings, and endless corridors that echoed every step. It gave off this sense of being watched, like the walls themselves were observing me. Even sitting in the sunlit living room, the laughter and chatter from the family felt hollow. There was always an edge I couldn't name, a tension I couldn't place. I kept asking myself, am I imagining things? Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe it was my grief talking, or the fact that I was trying so hard to fit in that I was reading too much into normal teenage behavior. I wanted to belong, and that hope made me blind to the pattern forming in front of me. But it was hard to ignore it when things escalated. During a family brunch with my dad's coworkers, Sean commented about my hair, saying, "You should really straighten it next time. It'll look more normal." Margaret laughed, and I felt a flush of anger and humiliation, but no one else reacted. I smiled politely, though inside I was boiling. The thing is, they didn't realize I had started paying attention to everything. The whispers, the glances, the way they treated me when no one else was looking. I found myself staying quiet, observing, storing everything in my mind like evidence. Every word, every joke, Every subtle dig was a puzzle piece, and slowly I started seeing the picture. They weren't just making mistakes. This was intentional. It wasn't me. It was them. Then came the invitation, a dinner that was supposed to be a family celebration. But I already knew it wouldn't be normal. I didn't know exactly what they were planning yet, that I felt it in the air, a weight I couldn't ignore. And that's when I realized, whatever happened that night, I needed to be ready.
It was finally the night of the dinner, the one I had been looking forward to and dreading at the same time. Margaret had invited the extended family, including a few of her friends, for a casual celebration. But as soon as I stepped into the dining room, I could feel something in the air that made my stomach tighten. The dining room was huge, with a long mahogany table that gleamed under the chandelier. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, and sunlight filtered through the tall windows, highlighting the polished floors. On the table, crisp linen napkins and sparkling glassware made everything look perfect. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. I was starting to notice them everywhere. Emily was fidgeting in her seat, glancing at her mom and whispering under her breath. Sean kept checking his phone and then smirking at Margaret when she noticed him. Even Margaret herself seemed slightly too relaxed, her smile just a little too wide, her eyes scanning the room as if she was rehearsing something. I tried to focus on small talk with my dad's guests, laughing politely at jokes, nodding when someone complimented the meal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being set up, that something was brewing beneath the surface. As the dinner progressed, I excused myself to refill my water glass and happened to walk by the kitchen. That's when I heard it. Low voices, murmurs from Margaret and Emily. At first I couldn't make out the words, but the tone told me everything. They were planning something about me, something that I would find out later in the evening. My pulse raced, but I didn't react. I just stayed quiet, listening from the hallway, making sure no one saw me. I walked back to my seat, my hands slightly trembling under the table. I could hear snippets of laughter from the guests, completely unaware of the tension that was building. I had never felt so out of place in a room full of people, and yet I knew I needed to be calm. I didn't know the full plan yet, but I knew enough to realize that the night was about to take a turn, and that whatever happened next, I had to be ready to respond. I excused myself from the dining table, pretending to get a drink of water, but my real intention was to pass by the kitchen, the place where I had overheard whispers before. And tonight, I wasn't wrong. Margaret and Emily were there, talking in hushed voices, leaning close together as if the walls themselves couldn't hear them. At first I thought maybe I'd misheard last time, but the conversation became crystal clear the moment I stopped near the doorway. "They're going to think we're being nice, but we need to make it clear," Margaret said, her tone sharp. "At dinner, we'll tell everyone that Kayla isn't really part of the family trust. She can't inherit anything. It's better if she doesn't know until we announce it." Emily laughed, a short, cruel sound. "They'll be shocked. She won't see it coming. Dad trusts us, but we'll make sure he doesn't back her." My heart sank. That was it. That was their plan, a public humiliation, calculated and cold, disguised as a family celebration. And the worst part? They thought I would never find out. I felt a mix of fear and fury, but I knew I couldn't act recklessly. I needed proof. I dug my phone from my pocket and discreetly started recording. Every word, every inflection, every laugh, I captured it all. This wasn't just a feeling anymore. This was evidence, undeniable and real. The kitchen smelled faintly of roasted vegetables and butter, the clatter of pots and dishes mixing with the soft hum of the air conditioning. It should have been comforting, a normal domestic moment. But right now it felt like a battlefield. Every word they spoke solidified the fact that I wasn't just imagining the tension at dinner. This was deliberate. I slowly backed away, keeping the phone recording, my mind racing. I had proof. I had the power to expose the truth, but I had to be smart. I returned to the table, smiling politely, laughing when asked about my day, keeping my voice calm, my emotions in check. No one could know I had just uncovered the plan they thought was hidden. The rest of the evening would unfold like a ticking bomb, and I knew one thing for certain. By the end of dinner, everyone would see them for who they really were. I just had to wait for the perfect moment. I returned to the dining table, heart still racing from what I had just overheard, but my face betrayed nothing. I smiled, poured myself some water, and made small talk as if nothing had happened. Every bite I took, every word I said, was a careful performance. The room was lively, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and polite chatter, but I could feel the tension beneath it all, like static in the air. Margaret kept throwing me these subtle, pointed looks, as if trying to guess whether I knew something. Emily and Sean exchanged glances every few minutes, smirking, clearly pleased with themselves. But they had no idea I had a recording in my pocket. I could feel my pulse in my ears as the conversation at the table shifted. They were setting the stage, dropping little hints for the guests, casually implying that I wasn't truly part of the family. The subtle racism, the microaggressions, the cruel jokes, all carefully calculated. They thought I was oblivious, but I wasn't. I was observing everything, committing every gesture, every word, every laugh to memory, and mentally preparing how I would respond. I stayed calm, sipping my water, smiling politely, nodding at my dad when he complimented me, all the while keeping the phone recording safely hidden. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows caught the crystal glasses on the table, reflecting light across the room, but instead of feeling warm, it felt like the spotlight was on me, and in a way it was. I had the power now, evidence I could use to expose the truth, but timing was everything. If I acted too soon, it could blow up in my face. As the main course was served, I noticed how everyone leaned into the conversation, unaware that the perfect plan they had crafted was about to unravel. My stomach twisted with anticipation. I had a clear vision in my mind. I would wait until they made their move, until they thought the moment was safe. Then I would speak, calm, clear, and undeniable. I didn't know exactly how they planned to humiliate me yet, but I knew one thing. By the end of this dinner, everyone would see the real side of my stepfamily, and I would make sure no one could deny it.
The dinner had reached the point where dessert was being served. Laughter filled the room, glasses clinked, and my stepfamily seemed certain that their plan was unfolding perfectly. They leaned in, casually dropping hints to the other guests, implying that I wasn't entitled to anything, that I was somehow the outsider in the family they had perfected. But I had the recording, every word, every cruel laugh, every hidden agenda captured in my pocket. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I had rehearsed this in my head 100 times. Stay calm, speak clearly, and let the evidence do the talking. I finally spoke. "Actually," I said, voice steady, "I think everyone should hear something that was just said in the kitchen earlier tonight." I held up my phone and pressed play. The whispers, the plotting, the cold, calculated words of Margaret and Emily filled the dining room. Gasps echoed through the room. The guests turned in shock, faces pale as they listened. Margaret's smile froze. Emily's smirk vanished. Sean looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. My dad's eyes widened in disbelief, the first signs of understanding dawning on him. I could feel my own pulse calming as I watched the reactions unfold. I added, "I never imagined I'd have to defend my place in my own family, but I think it's important that truth is seen." The room fell silent, heavy with tension. Margaret tried to speak, to justify herself, but no words could undo the proof that now sat in everyone's ears. The air felt electric. I could see the shame in their faces, the realization that their plan had backfired completely. And in that moment, I felt a mix of relief and quiet triumph. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't cried, I had exposed the truth, calmly and undeniably. By the end of the dinner, everything had changed. My stepfamily's carefully crafted image of control was shattered, and I had finally reclaimed my place and my dignity. But as I left the room that night, I knew one thing. This was only the beginning of making sure respect and truth were never ignored in my life again. After the recording played and everyone had processed what they had just heard, the room went silent. The tension that had been building for weeks finally lifted, at least for me. Margaret and Emily were left speechless, unable to defend their actions. Sean slouched in his chair, knowing he had lost any power he thought he had. And my dad, he looked at me with a mixture of shock, guilt, and finally understanding. For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen. Not just as the stepdaughter, not just as the outsider, but as someone with a voice, a presence, and a right to stand up for herself. That night, I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes patience and strategy are far more powerful than anger or confrontation. I took a quiet moment to myself after dinner, looking out over the city lights through the tall windows. Atlanta stretched below me, glittering in the night, and I realized something important. No one can define your worth or your place in life. Not your family, not your step-siblings, and certainly not anyone who underestimates you. If there's one thing I want anyone watching this to take away, it's this. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs of manipulation or subtle prejudice. And when you have evidence, when you know the truth, don't be afraid to stand your ground. You don't need to yell, you don't need to fight with words. Calm, clear, undeniable truth will always make the impact. By the end of that night, I felt a sense of peace. I had reclaimed my dignity, my confidence, and my voice. And even though the path ahead might still have challenges, I knew that I had the strength to face them and the lessons to guide me.
Life sometimes puts us in situations where people underestimate us, treat us unfairly, or even try to undermine us, whether it's family, coworkers, or friends. The most important thing to remember is this: trust your instincts, stay observant, and never ignore the signs when something doesn't feel right. Kayla's story shows that patience, careful thinking, and having evidence can turn a situation around. You don't need to yell, fight, or act impulsively. Calmly standing your ground, speaking the truth, and preparing yourself with proof can make a far bigger impact than reacting in anger. So, if you're facing subtle discrimination, manipulation, or people trying to take advantage of you, remember, you are stronger than you realize. You have a voice, and your voice matters. Protect yourself, be smart, and don't let anyone make you feel invisible or powerless. And always keep your confidence. The right timing and preparation can help you reclaim your power in a way that commands respect. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up for yourself? And remember, your voice matters. Stand tall, stay confident, and never let anyone make you feel invisible or powerless.